Okay, so how do we do one of these whole grain breads? Well, it's actually not all that hard. There's only a couple differences between how a whole grain bread works and how a regular bread works. The first step, of course, is yeast. So for this one, we're going to use just 2 teaspoons of active dry yeast, the kind of stuff you can buy in any grocery store. So just 2 teaspoons goes in there. And then we're going to put 2 cups of warm water in there. And how warm? Well, warm enough so that if you stick your fingers in, it just starts to hurt. Not really painful. So around 104 degrees Fahrenheit. So let me just go get those. And here's the second one. Okay, and now we're just going to let this sit for about 10 minutes or so to make sure that the yeast gets activated, and it should look all frothy on top. So why do we use whole grain flour at all? Well, whole grain flour is basically better for you. And there's sort of a long answer and a short answer for that, but the reason it's better for you is that um, whole grain flour uses the entire part of the wheat, which is edible. And white flour, the stuff that most of our bread is made out of, throws away 2/3 of that and throws away a lot of the nutrition with it. So whole grain flour has all 3 parts in, and one of those parts is bran, which we know is good for us, right? Because the doctors keep advising us to put more bran fiber into our diet. Well, whole grain has all 3 parts, including the bran, and it's very good for you. And what it does, basically, is that your body takes longer to digest whole grain flour than it does regular white processed flour. And as a result, you get a slower release of sugars, energy, into your bloodstream. So a sandwich made out of whole grain is going to do you more good, keeping you full for longer than the same amount of calories from a sandwich made of regular white bread. So this is actually the way to go if you want to stay healthy. Now, of course, moderation is everything. If you have tons and tons of whole grain bread, you can get fat from that too. But if you just replace your white bread with whole grain bread, you'll probably end up eating less because this is more filling and it's better for you. Looking down, this yeast still isn't ready to go, so I'm going to go away for a few minutes. And when I come back, it'll be all frothy and we can get to the next step. Okay, so see you in a minute. Okay, so I'm back, so let's see how we're doing here. The warm water's activated it, and it's all scummy on the top, which is great. So now we can start adding the flours. Now, the thing about a whole grain flour is that whole grain flour is, as you might imagine, quite dense. And as a result, if you add just whole grain flour to this, it's going to make a very, very dense bread that's not going to rise very much. Which is too bad. It'd be nice to make it, 100%. So as a result, what most of us do is we add a little bit of white flour just to give it a little bit of oomph, and then we add whole grain flour to it as well. So that's what we're going to do. But first things first, we're going to put 2 teaspoons of salt in here, which is what we usually do. This is both for taste and it has some chemical effects on how fast the yeast reacts. So 2 teaspoons of salt. And now I'm going to get 2 cups of flour, cup and a half, 2 cups of white flour, just regular white unbleached flour, the kind of stuff you can buy in the store, and put it in there. Don't want a lot, but just enough to get it started. I've made whole grain flours where there was no white at all, and they just come out really, really thick, and you can see why people didn't want to eat it. The history of brown flours is actually kind of interesting. Back in the Middle Ages, people ate a lot of, you know, brown flour because that was, you took your wheat to the miller and he'd crush it between 2 great stone slabs, often pulled by horses, and if you gave him all of the wheat, it would turn brown because it had all 3 parts. But people made flour out of all sorts of different things. The rich people tended to eat white flour, so there's a sort of a stigma against brown flour. But there are all sorts of different types of brown flour. Like regular wheat was considered the best, and then there was barley. And if you were really, really poor, sometimes you would eat, you're on the verge of starving. Sometimes you would end up eating what they called horse flour, which was made out of peas and something else. Like it wasn't even made out of grains. So there was literally just bakers in town, especially in France, they had prearranged prices per loaf to keep basically the peasants from rioting, and there were like 6 or 7 different types of breads that were being made at any one time. So fortunately, most of us can afford flour. So I've got about a cup and a half of white flour in there, and now I'm going to start putting the whole grain. And I'm going to put in about 3 or 4 cups once it's all done. So just add it gradually, mix it in. Now, one of the differences between a whole grain flour and a regular white, or a regular brown for that matter, is that you want the dough ball to be kind of sticky. Whole grain flours absorb moisture better than or rather, they're sort of thirstier in a sense. They'll keep absorbing the moisture of the water that you've got in your batter longer. So if your dough ball is completely dry once you're kneading it, that's going to make for a dry loaf. So you want to keep it sticky. So here's some, and we're going to add another cup or so. And just keep stirring until it becomes impossible to stir with a spoon, and then we have to get our hands in there. It's getting pretty close to that now. So that's still way too goopy, the way it is now. See, like that's too goopy. It's just way too wet, so I'm going to keep adding the whole grain. So, now I'm going to start using my hands here. Just knead it. And as usual with the kneading, it's just a question of folding it over on itself and pressing it down. And if your hands stick, just put a little more flour on it. But as I said, keep it kind of goopy. It's going to stay sticky, and that's okay. It may seem to experienced bakers, it may seem kind of weird to leave it goopy, but it helps in the long run. Yeah, so this one's still kind of sticky, but that's what I want. So, yeah, so you can see it sticking in my fingers, but that's all right. So I just want to rub it off my fingers, make it part of the dough ball. Ugh, it is a bit messy, I admit, but it tastes really good. And it's kind of cool making a bread which, takes us back into the history of bread making. The really traditional way, of course, wouldn't be using dry active yeast. Dry active yeast, the way we have it, didn't start to get isolated until the mid-19th century. And even then it was yeast cakes. It wasn't until, I think, the early 20th century which we started actually getting the powdered yeast that we have here. In the old days, the way they did it was you either use sourdough, which is a sort of live active yeast colony, or you just save a bit of today's bread, just pull off a chunk and save it till tomorrow and use that as your starter for the next bread. For professional bakers, the way they got their yeast was they got it from the brewers, the guys who were making beer, because a byproduct of the fermentation process would be a kind of sludgy yeast product on the bottom of the vats, and that stuff was given to the bakers who would then use it to make their bread. So lots of different ways to do it. I'm not about to start making beer so I can make yeast, so I'm happy we can just buy it from the grocery stores. Okay, so that's kind of sticky. It's not the way I would normally do a bread, but it'll work for this. So I'm just going to put that aside right there. Clean out the bowl. And then I'm going to let it rise for, it's certainly an hour, possibly more. It sort of depends on how warm your kitchen is. Right now, it's spring here, so my house is not massively hot. It's probably in Fahrenheit around 72 or 21 degrees Celsius, so I may leave this for about an hour and a half. It's just a question of you're just going to have to check on it and see how it's doing. We want to see it double. It should be obviously bigger in the bowl when you come back to take a look. So this is an art, not entirely a science. Or actually, it's scientific. It's just that the conditions in your kitchen keep changing because of the heat and the humidity. So, okay. So to clean it up, I'm just going to put this in the compost over here. Put some oil in the bowl. that. Stick it in, still nice and goopy. Push it over on itself, and put a damp towel over top. And we're done. So I'm going to leave that for about, as I said, about an hour to an hour and a half. And I'll come back and I'll talk to you again once it's ready for its second rise. Okay? Take care. Okay, so it's been an hour and a bit, and let's take a look and see how our whole grain's been turning out. Looks really good. It's definitely risen. One way to test it is just stick your finger into it, and if the hole closes right away, then it's not ready to go. But this one, the indentation for my finger is still in there, so that's definitely ready. So I think what I'll do with this one is I'm going to make it into a round loaf, and I'm going to just place it on a greased cookie sheet. But first I have to punch it down. So you can hear that squirsh, squirsh, squirsh. That's the sound of the air coming out, or the carbon dioxide coming out. So just knead it a little bit. It's still nice and moist. It's not as goopy as it was before, though, because the whole grain flour has been absorbing the liquid. Now it feels like a much more traditional dough in terms of its texture, and it's just not wet anymore, which is good. So I'm just going to make a really nice normal round loaf with this one. So I'm just squeezing it a bit, breaking up the gluten, which are the protein strands in the bread, which have formed, and this will allow it to have a better structure after its second rise. So there we go. So just make a nice round ball, and then place it on a cookie sheet like that. This won't be enormous, but that's fine. It's not going to go this big or anything. It'll probably get to about that size once it's risen, and then it'll rise more in the oven as well. So I'm just going to leave it there, put a towel on top, and we'll give it another hour or so to rise, and then we'll pop it in the oven, and we'll have a nice loaf. So I will see you in a bit. Take a bow, Red. Okay, I'm back. It's been just under an hour, and as you can see, the bread has certainly doubled in size. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to get it ready to go into the oven. Now, in the oven, I've put a pan of water on the lower layer, and I did that because having a steamy environment helps the crust get crustier. So it's an easy trick, and all the big bakeries do it. They have lots of steam in their ovens, so you can do it at home too. Just, a regular pan of water will do it. So next, I'm just going to brush this with a little bit of egg to give it some color on the top. Okay, just like that. Don't press down too hard, because of course you don't want to deflate the bread. And you don't have to do the whole thing. It's just for looks, basically. Like that. And I'm going to add a little bit of sesame seeds over top, and they'll stick to where I put the egg. And now I'm just going to put it in. So here goes. As you can see, it rose really, really nicely. It's a nice round loaf, and it's going to puff up even more in there. So I'm going to put it in, and I'm going to leave it in for half an hour at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And we'll be back in a minute, your time, to see how it turned out. Okay? Voila, there we go. It's huge. It's really, really nice. I bet it's going to taste great, but of course I can't break into it right away because it's still super, super hot. But so I'm going to give it a few minutes to cool down. But that wasn't hard to do. It's basically very much like a regular bread. It just has to be the dough has to be a little bit wetter, but it's going to taste a lot better because of the whole grain flour in it. So I encourage you to give this a go. Where can you buy whole grain flour? Well, you probably have to go to a health food store. Generally, it's not sold in regular supermarkets, but it doesn't cost a whole lot more, and it is better for you. So I encourage you to give it a try. That's it for now. So I'm Steve the Bread Guy saying bye-bye and good baking, and please send me your comments as you make these things. I love getting them. So take care. Bye-bye.